Hi, everybody. Ken Wood here, Director of Music Ministries at Hope Lutheran, and I wanted to speak to folks who either have been or are interested in becoming song leaders, as well as folks who are anthem soloists. I want to separate those two roles, although many times they're done by the same individual, and speak to them separately just because occasionally it is two separate people or two separate entities within a given service. And I want to specify and lay out the details for what these are, why we do it, and make sure that there aren't any questions about the expectations therein, because it's important that everybody who participates in this realizes that the role is an important one within the body of Christ, as well as for the importance of leadership. Keeping in mind that this is a necessity because primarily at services where there are no ensembles, like a choir or other larger group, we need at least one capable individual who can sing on mic amplified to lead the congregation along with the accompaniment. The accompanist typically is going to be a staff keyboard player, either at organ or piano, although it could theoretically be on a different instrument. And of course, hopefully it goes without saying that I'm speaking to Hope's version of our traditional service. We generally separate those two categories. And when you hear me talk about things like liturgy and settings and things like that, not that those words don't carry over into contemporary realms and other forms of services that maybe are less formal, but I'm speaking specifically of our traditional services. The settings that we use comprise of pieces that remain for a period of time longer than a week. Those settings that you might hear me call the liturgy, which really is a poor use of the term, but it's a liturgical setting. Terms like call to worship, Kyrie, gospel acclamation, canticle of praise, sermon response, offertory, even the Lord's Prayer that has been sung. Those are all sung elements within these settings. Generally, unless it's a special time of year like Advent or Christmas or Easter or something, Hope uses three basic settings that are comprised of pieces of music that are coupled together, and they rotate throughout the year so that we're returning to familiar pieces of music in time that we've done in the past, but we're not just, doing them so frequently that you get bored. So those rotations are happening throughout a given time period, and then those settings might be different or unique at special times of the year. So hopefully, if you've been here long enough, you're going to be familiar with this material. Stylistically, it's not all going to be the same, and it may come from a repertoire or a style of music that you're less familiar with or more comfortable with. But it's important that you realize that as a leader, it is your responsibility to familiarize yourself with it equally, because rather than following someone else when you arrive, like you would if you were in an ensemble or in the congregation, you are leading. In fact, it is really the role of the accompanist to follow you, not the other way around. So it's important that you know the material well enough that you can lead and direct. I don't mean with your hand, but direct by sing confidently and move the piece forward regardless of whatever may take place, so that if no one else, that you can be the person that everyone can follow. So in doing that, you've got to collect the right material for the week that you are scheduled. Now, this is where you have to be a little tech savvy, and it's important to do so, both hopefully because this is just the efficient way that we can send out information to people, as well as the fact that to choose not to, or to accept that learning curve as too difficult, basically tells me that you may not be the right person for this particular task, which is okay, but there may be something better suited for you in terms of church volunteering. But Dropbox is a cloud-based file sharing location that effectively is like where I can put something that you can then go to and get access to it, to gather the material and then bring it onto your own computer and print it, or your own electronic device. Meaning that if you wanted to look at the stuff on your phone or on your iPad or whatever, or your computer even, instead of printing it onto paper, you could use that during the service to follow along. So you need to know where to get that stuff and then what it all should be. So Dropbox is the spot, and everybody receives that Dropbox link when they first become a song leader. So if you don't have it, if you don't have it saved from an email, or you don't have it loaded onto your computer, all you need to do is remember this email, and you'll hear me say it again and again. Music update at hopeforall.church. Music update is the full word, no dots or spaces, at hope, H-O-P-E, the number 4, A-L-L.church. That's the place where you can send any questions, any requests, anything that you're not sure about. It's also the place where you can ask for help if you're trying to do this and you're not sure how. But Music Update at hopeforall.church is the place where you can let us know that you need that link sent to you so that you can get into Dropbox. And then once you're there, you'll be able to go to the appropriate week by date chronologically, and then you should be able to get into all the material that you need. So I'm going to show you examples of what you should be able to find and print out. First thing, and probably most important, is the one-page colored outline that looks like this. You'll notice the different colors. They're not always going to pertain to what you need to do. One of them, at least, will be yours, but this is representing all of the campus services in a weekend, and that's why the colors are different. So you need to look for which one you're assigned to, but then also see all of the material on there that doesn't have a color assigned. The white is just the stuff that stays the same for everybody. That's going to tell you specifically all the liturgical music, the setting, as I said, that is expected. And as I mentioned, those settings remain consistent for a given period of time within a season that's longer than 1 week to week to week. But then it's also going to tell you what hymns we're going to do within the given weekend, and those do change weekly. So you're going to need to see this outline so you know the order of service. And this is probably going to be available sooner than the bulletin is itself. So it's important for you to find this and get to it so that you can see what all else you're going to need to get. Okay? So once you have that, you can also tell that there's a little theme up here. It says, oh, here's the scripture that we're doing. Okay? And this bolded one tells you that that's actually the theme scripture. So that's what the pastors are going to preach about. And over here, we just so happen that we put the theme up here. It says that this week we're going to be talking about peace. It's the third fruit of the Spirit. Sometimes it might not be that specific, but you get the idea. Okay, so moving on. The next thing you're going to need to find is liturgy, the setting, okay? In the case of the one that is showing right now, since I'm recording this in the summer of 2024, we have the title page that should be sufficient to show you which one we've got. It says that it's Hope Lutheran Church, and it's telling you that it's ordinary time, summer of 2024. That should basically let you know that you're in the right spot. And it's saying that it's setting C. Those are just random letters to let you know. As I mentioned, there are 3 revolving ones, so there's obviously A and B as well. But we're in C right now, and we are in summer, so that lets you know you're in the right ballpark. All the music associated behind that cover page will be the music that you will sing within the service and lead the congregation in. That's that seasonal stuff that does not change week to week. It stays the same for a longer length of time. It also might be familiar to you, and you might not even need the music. But don't come in expecting that you can use the screens to help you, because what if we have some technical problem and the screens aren't working? You've got to have another source to make sure that you can confidently sing without there being the screens, just in case. And as I said, you are the leader, so you need to make sure that you can lead and not be relying on that. So make sure that you either have it memorized or that you've got the paper in hand. Okay, now one thing that I've added is a sound file associated with the setting as well. And that's in a folder in each Dropbox date. And it's titled Traditional Liturgy, trad.liturgy. I'm going to go in as I'm talking, and I'm going to play this just to give you an idea. This is a pre-recorded accompaniment of each of these liturgy pieces. And I'm going to specifically pick the Kyrie because I know this one is complicated and sometimes it throws people off. So let me play this and listen to it. So this is our Kyrie. It's actually third in the order number. You can hear that it's playing right now. And this is where we'd come in. Kyrie eleison, on our world and on our way. Kyrie eleison every day, etc., etc. So that is there now for you to be able to rehearse with. That way you can come in well prepared. And in some instances, I think we may actually be attaching that particular pre-recorded version to some of the screens so that we have consistency in the accompaniment, because I know that some of the syncopated versions of these, in particular with this setting C, present issues. So if you learn this one in particular, you can be confident in knowing that it will be that way when you come in and sing with it later. And that will help you have consistency there. So those are your liturgical setting resources. Next in order is the hymns. As I said, these hymns change weekly, and there are 3 at least associated with each week. You've got a gathering and ascending. Those are non-negotiable, meaning in the hymn sheet that we put out actually for the congregation, those few people that think they like sheet music to read, we make a hymn sheet for them to read the sheet music, and it's going to have the gathering on one side, and it's going to have the sending on the other side. This is the front and the back of the services, and then in red it tells you which verses they are. Those correspond with that chart that I already showed you here, which down the line it tells you when you get to the hymn, it says what that first one's going to be. Number 3, gathering hymn. I've got Peace Like a River. It says all verses. So that's where we're getting this information. It also tells you which hymnal it comes from. But you don't need to worry about that because these things are all going to be on paper and you can just print those out and use them. So there's your hymn sheet. Definitely print this out and use this. Hopefully it goes without saying that if you're an alto, bass, or tenor, you're still going to sing the melody though. Because if you're a soloist, you're not going to sing a part. People need to follow you as leader and sing the melody. If you're a duet and one of you singing the melody strongly, that's a possibility. But you got to have at least one person singing strong melody. And if you're going to opt for something, always opt for melody confidently, because everybody else can follow, and that's more important than anything. Now, I mentioned there's 3 hymns. The third one is not going to be on the hymn sheet. It is something that we added this past year in 23-24, and that is going to take place during communion. However, this has now become, rather than mandatory, this is an option, so I need you to listen carefully. If you would like, you can find and print the third hymn, which is the communion hymn. In this case, it's Make Me a Channel of Your Peace, the prayer of St. Francis, which I have gone in and I found that. I looked on that colored sheet, saw which one it was. I found the folder and I printed the PDF of this. Okay, and I can sing that, knowing that the accompanist is going to have it prepared. But if I don't know it, or if that's a lot of singing and I want to take a break, I don't have to sing it. However, I can't show up and not tell anybody what I'm going to do. I need to coordinate my plans with the people who are going to be affected in advance, which means you need to know who the accompanist is who is associated with the service that you're singing. For the most part, at each campus, it's going to be the same individual, except that at Central, it's different people on Saturday night versus Sunday morning. So hopefully if you go anywhere regularly, you know who those folks are, and it's important for you to reach out to them even if that means emailing musicupdate@hopeforall.church to get people's email addresses and or cell phone numbers so that you can contact them and communicate to say whether or not you're going to sing that communion hymn, and if not, so that they can fill with extra music instrumentally. Another option is perhaps you want to sing something different. If you have a second piece in mind beyond the anthem, which we'll talk about in a minute, that's also an option. But once again, that's going to affect some people, not just the accompanist, but it also might affect the AV person. So now you need to not just tell your accompanist, but you need to know who's going to be in the booth. Now that's a rotation of people that's not always consistent. It's best to use musicupdate@hopeforall.church, once again, to send your intentions, and then we can forward that information along to the appropriate people. If no one else, we can make sure that Jimmy, who oversees the program, gets that and lets the right people know who may be affected, depending on what the date is and what the campus service is that we're talking. But those choices that you're considering making on behalf of communion and the use of a third piece of music during that time are important for you to decide in advance and to make everybody who's affected well aware of before you just show up. Okay? All right. Next thing you need to print, aside from your one-page colored outline, your liturgy, your hymns, is now the bulletin. Now, we don't do a printed bulletin here. We use the screens, but we do make a certain amount of these available. This is not the large print one, but it is a pastor's copy that we use for all leaders in the church. And I put a PDF of this up just like everything else. And once again, you can put this on a device if you wanted to look at it off a phone or an iPad, or you can print it out. And once again, if you have trouble with any of those things and you need something printed, you can let us know, but don't wait until Saturday or Sunday. You need to inform Music Update at hopeforall.church early in the week so that somebody who gets that can be sure that we can get the information taken care of and printed out for you, particularly if you're at a different campus. But we can get that done for you in enough time so that it's available for you when you need it. But ideally, you can print these things on your own or use your own electronic device so that you can have everything you need. Also, don't come in and expect the office to do it for you. They've got enough work. So this is something that the music department can cover within itself as long as you give us enough time. So this bulletin is now going to correspond with everything else that we've already discussed. It's going to have the full order of service, which includes all the spoken parts that were not included in the outline before. It's going to have the parts that are played, like the prelude, and the parts that are sung, like the liturgical pieces and the settings. All of that in order. It's going to have hymn lyrics by which ones are sung, as you can see. So if there are verses left off, they're not going to be included. But everything should correspond with all the other material that you've already got. But if this is the only thing you follow, it doesn't have music, and you are at risk of having something be incorrect. Or the fact is that there are times when, for instance, when it says Anthem, it's just a title. It doesn't say, it's just a placeholder. It doesn't have the title, and it doesn't have lyrics or anything like that. It also doesn't put the communion hymn in during communion, so you would need to know that that's taking place. So it's important to use all these resources to follow the service because, as I said, once again, you are leading. You need to know what you're doing when you show up. You need to be in charge and capably aware, not following somebody else or last minute asking somebody to get you things that you didn't provide for yourself. So that's important. And in doing that, making sure that you arrive at least 30 minutes prior so that you can get set up, correspond with anybody, including your accompanist, your AV person, anybody else, perhaps the pastor who's preaching. Make sure that you made eye contact. And also, don't be running through last-minute stuff 5-10 minutes before the service is about to start. It's bad form. It's unprofessional. Generally, that's when the prelude should be taking place. All of those kinds of things should already be finished by then. So it's important to give yourself enough time and be finished by that point, so that you should either be sitting up there or waiting to come out and begin leading once the service actually begins. Now, at this point, I'm going to take a quick break and let you know two things. Number one, I'm about to tell you about Anthem Soloists, but before I do, I'm going to tell you just a brief bit of information. It's a two-part bit of information. This is to make sure that you actually watch this video. So I'm going to tell you that after college, I led an a cappella group. It was a quartet. And later on, I'm going to tell you the name of it. But right now, I'm going to let you know that the city that took place in was Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Remember that, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay, continuing. Now I'm going to speak to Anthem soloists. Okay, so if you are here arriving, in addition to everything I've already said, as well to be an anthem soloist or just to be an anthem soloist, either way, your job is to provide a special piece of music, ideally that coordinates with the scripture message of the day. We already know where you can find that. That's going to be on that outline. You can see the scriptures. You can kind of get a sense from those about what the message is going to be for the day, depending on the season that we're in. And if you have questions about that, what's the email address you can ask? musicupdate@hopeforall.church. Okay? But your job is to pick that piece of music, not have somebody pick it for you. Okay? Now, if you need assistance, there may be somebody who can help you with that, but they're not automatically going to be. Certain times of the year, paid staff, even some capable volunteers, we're all very busy. So this isn't an opportunity for you to get your feet wet and have somebody walk you through the process of learning to sing a solo for the first time. Unfortunately, this really isn't that kind of a thing. We need people that are self-driven and are capable enough as leaders that you can confidently show up and do what's needed, because we have so much going on at one time that I really need to have the faith in everybody that when you're up there that you can do what needs to be done. Now, based on the piece you choose, there may be three different kinds of accompaniment, okay? Either you could be self-accompanying, perhaps you play guitar or piano, okay? Perhaps you require a pianist, you require a staff person to accompany, okay? Particularly if it's keyboard led, because that's pretty much all we are going to readily have available. Or there's the option of a track. Now, many of the pieces these days, track accompaniment is available, but in the off chance that it isn't, and we don't have anything available live, there's a possibility of creating a track by doing a recording in advance. So those are kind of a subset of that option. Okay, now depending on which one you choose, if you are self-led and everything like that, you can pretty much just show up and we'll trust that you're going to be ready to go. But if you're dealing with the creation of a track, for instance, that recording has to be made. Okay, if you're dealing with providing a track that needs to be played on your behalf, that recording has to be given to the right individual in the booth. If you are dealing with a live accompanist who needs to practice and provide that music for you, then that means you're dealing with a rehearsal, okay? In all of these circumstances, you cannot wait till the last minute because we need the time to prepare. And it's respectful to other people on the team that you don't assume that they can just do their job last minute because you forgot to tell them. So AV booth, if they're involved, either because you're giving them a track or because you want to let them know that you need whatever kind of setup, one microphone for you or a guitar line for your guitar, or you need a separate microphone set up at the piano because you're going to sit down and play your one song, but then you're going to lead from somewhere else when you're doing song leaders. Whatever that AV setup is, you can't assume that we can read your mind. You need to let us know. And they would like to know at least 2 weeks prior to your date. So how do you let them know all this information and who do you tell? musicupdate@hopeforall.church is the place to go. You can let us know there and we will forward it along to the appropriate people and make sure everybody gets the information that they need. But let's say that you're going to just have the accompanist who is assigned to that service play for you while you're there. Well, first of all, don't assume that just because they play the piano that your piece that was transcribed from a, Vivaldi violin concerto, for four hands piano can be played by one individual with 3 days notice. Okay, it might be too complicated, and they have the right to tell you, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I give them first refusal, and then from that point we have to determine what our options are. As I mentioned, if we can make a recording, that's fine. On the off chance that another individual is available and we can afford to have them come in, perhaps I might be able to pay somebody else, but that is not a given because we don't have the budget to pay an infinite amount of people to either rehearse with you or come in and double or even triple up on one service. So let's assume that the individual who is assigned to the service as an accompanist on the organ or piano is available and able to also accompany your song. All right, that's a great thing. However, you need to work with them to determine when you can rehearse prior. Now, if you're well versed and you all just need a quick run through, all the better. You want to do that half an hour, 45 minutes before the service, that's fine. If you need more than that, you need to understand that their job is to not be your vocal coach. They're not going to put in multiple hours of their time on or off the clock on your behalf to help you learn notes. It's important that you come in prepared so that when you schedule your one rehearsal that I allow for them to be paid prior to your solo, that it lasts no longer than an hour, and as one instance prior to that solo. So that is not one per week. That is not one in a month. That is one. Okay? So if you're scheduled to do a solo in 3 weeks from now, between now and then, you have exactly one instance that you can get with your accompanist to meet and rehearse to make sure that you're comfortable with your piece of music, and pray that it doesn't take longer than an hour. It really shouldn't, because that's all I can afford to pay them out of the budget to do that. They're not on staff to be able to facilitate you in learning stuff. And there again, if that's just too difficult for you, then I understand you may be better suited to learn and hone your chops in an ensemble and work to the level of eventually being able to handle a solo, or even working with a smaller group to where there's other people to help pick up some of that slack. But unfortunately, we're just at a level where we cannot facilitate folks that need that much assistance on a per individual basis. So now you've got your rehearsal taken care of. You've let the booth know your accompanist is good to go. But it's important, in addition to all that other information, that we know what the song is. That colored sheet that I showed earlier that looked something like this. Ideally, we love to have all the titles of the anthems on here. Oh, we're missing one. That's a question mark. But ideally, we want to see what that title is, so that it's one less thing that can get messed up when we're putting all this together in a weekend. So if you know what piece you're going to do and you're not waiting to the last minute to pick it, just email us and let us know what the title is. I don't need to know who wrote it. I don't need to know all the details about its copyright and stuff. I just need to know the name of it, okay? That way we can go, oh, okay, great. We can't wait to hear such and such this weekend. And you go, oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you. I changed my mind. We're doing this other thing instead. Well, good. I'm glad we established that and we found out that it's gotten changed, and now we can tell the booth that it's different. Those things are very important. Those kinds of details are what keep us from allowing things to slip through the cracks. So that music update at hopeforall.church is where you can send all that information. Now, when you're picking your songs, one thing that's important to remember is the length. Okay, this is not a concert. And if you, particularly from repertoire like classical or art songs, maybe even jazz sometimes, some of that material tends to be lengthy. And even though it might be from sacred repertoire, it's going to be too long for our services. Quite frankly, we cannot have solo anthems coming in at longer than 3 to 4 minutes tops. And if they do, you need to cut it. You need to trim something. You need to find ways to remove a verse and slim it down. And if I find out that that's happening consistently, we're going to have a discussion about that kind of thing, because this is not an opportunity for you to have a big old audience during church as a captive group of people. We're here to worship, and we're here to give glory to God. And yeah, there's a passive worship experience for the folks that are sitting and listening to you use your gifts, but at the same time, we also have a schedule to keep, and we want to respect people's time. So keep that in mind. The other options, although it's rare, occasionally folks want to sing more than one piece of music during a service. This is not mandatory, and certainly not something that you need to worry about doing. Having one thing is plenty, but if you're looking for a place to do something additional, I mentioned already that in place of the communion hymn, a second anthem could go there. So instead of the assigned third hymn for communion, you could theoretically put a communion anthem in as a solo piece, but keep in mind that it needs to be appropriate stylistically for communion, and it also needs to be thematically somewhat appropriate for either communion or the theme of the day. So it's not going to be celebrate Jesus, celebrate, okay, during communion in a traditional service. Okay, so keep that in mind. One other spot, if you've got something that's real high energy that doesn't seem to fit well at a communion, but you really love to do that second piece, is possibly as a final prelude, meaning it would be the last thing performed right before the service begins. You would have to work with the accompanist, the service accompanist, to make sure that the timing of that was worked out, because that would affect their preparation and the amount of music they would normally be providing. I ask them to provide usually anywhere from 8 to 12 minutes of instrumental music per service on a weekly basis. I don't need there to be more than that. I don't usually like there to be much less than that, but if you wanted to throw in a second solo, then they could cut something, or they could start sooner, but you guys would have to work that out. And then again, the AV person, as well as perhaps the pastor, would also need to know. So all of these kinds of choices that can be made that will allow for some flexibility and differentiation from service to service over the course of a given weekend are all designed to actually give you some individuality and help with things being a little bit more indicative of the people that are doing things, rather than some industrialized institutional approach. But at the same time, understand that we have to qualify things from a biblical standpoint of excellence, whereas everybody is giving their best. I look at it as the parable of the talents. We don't want you burying something in the ground and then coming back later and saying, look what I did. No, that's not an investment. An investment is trying to work with what you've got, give the most that you have, and then try to gain more from it, so that the next time you're giving a little bit more than that. So we're improving on what we have. It's not about perfection, but it is also about preparation, making sure that you're doing due diligence, because God is worth it. And these are all things that I find valuable and important. And I think that as a team, we can all really work together to put on a super unique and special worship weekend week in and out. And I just want you to know how pleased I am and thankful that you're willing to consider helping us with that. It takes a lot of people to make that happen. And now finally, the second half of my question was not the place that I did that a cappella group, but the name of the a cappella group I did after college was Verbatim. So remember that, remember the place from earlier, and remember the name from now, because you're going to have to prove to me you watched this video by answering both of those questions. Thanks so much.